My name is Andy Sachs. I recently graduated from Northwestern University.
And what are you doing here?
Well, I think I could do a good job as your assistant. And, yeah, I came to New York to be a journalist and sent letters out everywhere and finally got a call from Elias Clark and met with Sherry up at Human Resources. And basically, it's this or Auto Universe.
So you don't read Runway?
No.
And before today, you had never heard of me?
No.
And you have no style or sense of fashion?
Well, I think that depends on what you're...
No. That wasn't a question.
I was editor-in-chief of the Daily Northwestern. I also won a national competition for college journalists with my series on the Janitors Union, which exposed the exploitation of... Yeah, okay. You're right. I don't fit in here. I am not skinny or glamorous, and I don't know that much about fashion, but I'm smart. I learn fast, and I will work very hard.
I've got the exclusive on the...
Okay, so for those who aren't familiar, that clip is from the infamous film, The Devil Wears Prada. And what we saw was Anne Hathaway's character, Andrea, introducing herself to pretty much a pillar in the fashion industry, depicted in the film by Meryl Streep, and her name was Miranda in the film. And we clearly saw Andrea, the character, trying to pitch herself, trying to go over her, stats, her experience, clearly things listed on her resume, to share why she felt like she was fit for the position of becoming Miranda's assistant. Although she didn't do any background research on Miranda, who she was, and the barriers that she broke within the respective industry, nor did she know much about fashion. She did know how to market herself as far as the assets and the attributes that she planned to bring to the table. Now, the reason why I will be dissecting this film and why I chose that clip to start off is the dynamic between Miranda and Andrea is a perfect depiction of what I often talk about on my page, of an individual who fits the envious archetype of the quote-unquote malicious mentor. Furthermore, in this video today, I will be addressing both of our muses, which will be both Andrea and Miranda, to further depict this dynamic. So without further ado, let's hop right in. We're going to go back and we're going to analyze the clip that was used in the beginning of this video. Despite Miranda's seemingly callousness and her dismissiveness, even making jabs at Andrea, she was taking mental note of Andrea's pitch. And one thing that sparked Miranda's interest, or at least seemingly from what we can observe in this clip, is Andrea's realistic pitch and her resourcefulness. She shared that, clearly, I am not super educated when it comes to fashion. And from my presentation, you can tell that I'm not necessarily fashion-centered. But what I can bring to the table is my experience, my intellect, and my work ethic. Now, what sparked Miranda's interest, and the reason why I want to highlight the malicious mentor, is Miranda became intrigued and took Andrea's application and her pitch into consideration because Miranda is also a woman of intellect and tenacity. What's important to understand about a lot of malicious mentors is they don't just align themselves with certain environments, or better yet, let me rephrase that. They don't just end up in prominent positions just because. Malicious mentors are often great people readers. They are also very intellectual. They are also very resourceful. They have a tenacious nature. They have a resilient nature, but they are also fast thinkers. They are people who could think ahead, and they know how to bring certain people in to fit into their team. Malicious mentors oftentimes gain prominent positions because they are very insightful and efficient. So, ironically enough, despite Miranda's, disposition towards Andrea initially, she knew by simply hearing Andrea speak that she was going to hire her. Now, the dangerous part about the malicious mentor is this, hence the term malicious. They oftentimes sustain their positions because they take those positive qualities and attributes, but they often use these very attributes to exploit and to capitalize on others for their personal benefit. Benefiting isn't always about, climbing a ladder or receiving some kind of tangible resource, because it's pretty evident in the film that Miranda was already comfortable in her prominent position, rightfully so. She earned her stripes, she worked her way up the ladder. However, there are instances where people who are in these positions and are operating from the malicious mentor archetype, what they do is they pull from people's emotional resource, they pull from people's mental resource to fuel themselves and to validate themselves. So this can oftentimes look like breaking people down, taking jabs at their confidence, making sly remarks. And in this way, when they realize that people do not defend themselves or do not advocate for themselves, they internalize it as them exerting power and dominance over other people, which feeds into a sense of grandiosity and superiority. To provide context on what I mean by the malicious mentor, I'm going to read from the section titled The Malicious Mentor listed in this book. And for those who already have the book, it starts on page 41. And it simply states, the malicious mentor strategically keeps a thumb on you, not to diminish your resources and opportunities, but to ensure you never exceed too high for their comfort. A malicious mentor is oftentimes a person in a position of leadership, counsel, and guidance. This envious person can be a supervisor, boss, teacher, professor, pastor, deacon, prophet, close friend, or even a family member. Their leadership position makes them exceptionally dangerous because they know how to block your upward mobility. Their insecurities or abandonment issues keep them from allowing those whom they are supposed to be helping to reach their fullest potential. This was evident throughout the film, as long as Andrea worked for Miranda, where Miranda had a tendency of constantly cutting Andrea down to size with certain remarks, certain sly comments. And this communication style is also referenced in the book in the section titled Cut Them Down to Size Tactic. You will realize that a lot of malicious mentors, or even an environment where there is an envious person present or a group of envious people present, you will realize that they will often use cutting them down to size tactic as a communication style to keep their targets under their thumb.
They're so different.
Something funny?
No, nothing's, it's just that both those belts look exactly the same to me. I'm still learning about this stuff and,
This stuff? Oh, okay. I see. You think this has nothing to do with you. You go to your closet and you select, I don't know, that lumpy blue sweater, for instance, because you're trying to tell the world that you take yourself too seriously to care about what you put on your back.
But don't get caught up in the facade of the insults and the attempts to cut you down to size. Because most of the time, these people will refuse to let their targets go. This is why they will make a sly remark about you, and when you set a boundary or you try to separate yourself, they will chase you down. And the reason being is that they do find value in you. It's just they don't want you to perceive that value because they fear you abandoning them, which is why I felt compelled to read that other section in the book, because of course we can address the fact that dealing with the malicious mentor is very difficult. It's also important that we shine light on the fact that a lot of the things that they say or they do to their subordinates is wrong. But these people didn't just wake up and, miraculously become that person. They typically become that person through an abundance of negative experiences. I specifically wanted to highlight the abandonment piece. A lot of malicious mentors, or a lot of people who fit the malicious mentor archetype, they find themselves treating others badly while also keeping their claws in the very individuals that they downsides that they discredit is to keep their targets from seeing their worth and abandoning them. So although people who fit this archetype, they make it almost intolerable to be around them or to deal with them, if you could find it in your heart to exercise compassion and empathy and just ask, why is this person like this? Like, where is this stemming from? And a lot of the time it is rooted in that fear of abandonment. If we look at it specifically through the lens of envy, they may fear you moving on to something better and possibly surpassing them. However, there are other cases where malicious mentors operate in that way because they fear you leaving them and reopening a wound from their past that they haven't properly addressed. There are instances where people become a product of circumstances. And clearly, The Devil Wears Prada is a film that depicted, professional experiences within a specific industry, and that being the fashion industry. I'm sure that there were other components, underlying components that contributed to why Miranda's presentation was the way that it was once she reached that height of success, that pinnacle of success. It could be, the fact that she was a woman and who knows the things that she probably had to deal with or the invalidation that she had to endure. So there's all these other moving components that can contribute to why a person develops this callousness. Although compassion and empathy is super important, and it's just a great way for us to personally exercise self-awareness and to step outside of our own sphere and take into consideration, why people act the way that they do, what they've been through. Aside from that, you also owe it to yourself to understand that I can exercise compassion and empathy, but not subject myself to this kind of treatment. And a lot of the time, people may feel like they have to go from one extreme to another. But when you're dealing with the malicious mentor, someone who fits the malicious mentor profile, you have to understand that balance is going to be your best friend. You can be compassionate towards this person, and in fact, I encourage it because it will help you refrain from internalizing a lot of the jabs and a lot of the negativity that they spew at you. However, the flip side to this coin is this. If you find yourself falling too deep into that compassion and empathy rabbit hole, you may find yourself becoming slowly but surely intertwined in their web, and you don't want it to get to the point to where you're too far gone and you feel like you can't get out or you can't branch out. Because the attacks and the disrespect will only get worse.
Miranda, I'm so sorry. Do you know why I hired you? I always hire the same girl. Stylish, slender, of course. Worships the magazine, but so often they turn out to be, disappointing and, stupid. So, you, what's that? Impressive resume and the big speech about your so-called work ethic. I thought you would be different. I said to myself, go ahead. Take a chance. Hire the smart fat girl. I had hope. My God, I live on it. Anyway, you ended up disappointing me more than any of the other silly girls.
I really did everything I could think of.
That's all.
So that clip supports the statement that I just now made, as far as being cautious of allowing your compassion to consume you, the point you're caught up in the malicious mentor's cobweb. But another thing I want to note in respects to that clip and the dialogue that Miranda and Andrea had was, if we pay close attention, what Miranda really did was she utilized manipulation by exploiting the pitch that Andrea presented to her in their first encounter. So she utilized the vulnerabilities that she shared in the initial pitch, although she supplemented it with, her positive attributes, but she weaponized that information to guilt trip Andrea. So the statement she made about, the girls that I previously hired, they fit the bill as far as being thinner, they fit the bill as far as, doing their quote unquote research, but the reason why I typically dispose of them is because, they're not that smart. And that's just me paraphrasing, right? Now, The tricky thing about it is this, and this is why I'm on my page and I'm often referencing the section in the book that talks about how important it is to preserve and protect your sense of self-confidence and self-esteem. Because in that moment, Andrea felt like she let Miranda down. Little did she know, all Miranda did was regurgitate her initial pitch, and she utilized the vulnerabilities that Andrea shared in her initial pitch against her. So there really wasn't a need for her to break down or feel like she dropped the ball or she wasn't worthy, because Miranda was simply repeating everything that Andrea initially stated to her. So when you're dealing with envious people, when you're dealing with the malicious mentor, malice in their nature oftentimes presents itself in manipulation and control. This is why I made the statement that I made earlier as far as utilizing compassion and empathy to exercise self-awareness on our own behalf. But most importantly, when you find yourself dealing with envious attacks, using it as an internal resource to stop you from internalizing a lot of the negative comments that the person may project onto you. Because compassion and empathy, if you're not careful, can cause you to end up in these types of situations where someone manipulates you and guilt trips you even though you weren't in the wrong, or they weaponize your vulnerabilities and, your shortcomings against you. So this was a prime example of extending the olive branch coming back around to bite us. So in sum, the dynamic between Miranda and Andrea shows us that sometimes our compassion and our empathy can reach its limit. And what I mean by that is there are instances where our compassion and our empathy is dispersed, but we also take into account that we do not have to wait for the person to come around and to start to treat us better and to start to treat other people in their environment better. Sometimes you can leave it at what you poured into that situation and move on so that you can protect your emotional and mental, even relational well-being. You are not obligated to stick around and endure mistreatment rooted in someone else's unresolved projection. Okay, so that's all that I have for this video. And I want to thank you so much for tuning in. But of course, I'm not going to leave it at that. I want to hear from you all. I want to hear your perspectives on this. And I also want to hear if you can relate to being in a mentee position, having encounters with the malicious mentor. But I also want to hear if you found yourself in a malicious mentor position. And feel free to share what was going on for you. What did you learn from it? What do you wish you could have done differently? Feel free to drop it in the comment section below. And I look forward to speaking to you guys in the next one.